All right. So, welcome everyone. And today I just wanted to share with you some different styles of yoga postures, a little bit about where they come from, what the different styles are, and what each class kind of entails if you're going to look at a class. So you're aware of, you don't just jump into a class and then it turns out to be something that you weren't aware that it was. So I'm going to share with you a little bit more about the styles that I've practiced and that resonate with me, that I've gravitated towards, and that I've studied a lot on my own or with someone. And I'll start with those, and then we'll just briefly touch on the other types of classes that you might come across. So, if you're going to a regular studio nowadays, you might see like all levels classes and level one, two, three, these types of things. Gentle class you might see, which is a gentle class, obviously. That's not going to be as strengthening. And power yoga is more like calisthenics, pretty much. It's a lot of like exercising around the yoga postures instead of holding the postures. It's more strength focused. So it's also Vinyasa style. So Vinyasa just means it. The origins of Vinyasa actually come from this man here. His name is Krishnamacharya. So originally it's called Vinyasa Krama, and it's just a technique. It's not actually a style of yoga. This is something more modern. So Vinyasa style is one of the more modern types of yoga. Okay. And we're not going to touch into all the different types of modern yoga. I'll just briefly mention them so you're aware what they are. But we're going to focus more on where it comes from and the more traditional types of yoga. And the Vinyasa yoga now is practiced like you're constantly moving in the class, right? Some teachers teach it where you're holding postures a little bit in between or holding postures longer, depending on the teacher. But originally, Vinyasa is a technique. So it was used as a way to count the postures, actually, the movements in a posture. So, for example, if a movement has five vinyasas in it, say, it would be reach your arms over, inhale, reach your arms overhead. That's one vinyasa. Exhale, fold forward. That's two vinyasa. Inhale, halfway lift, flatten your back. That's vinyasa three. Exhale, fold, vinyasa four. Sweep your hands overhead, palms together. That's vinyasa five. So we would say this posture has five vinyasas, and it means movements. So they translate it as move in a special way. So it was originally used to count the movements. So that's actually the origin of the more recent Vinyasa style of yoga. Okay, this man over here, Swami Shivananda Yoga, which you still may have heard of, and of course it changes and evolves over time, just like everything. But Krishnamacharya's style of teaching, I would say, is more therapeutic and more traditional in the sense that there's a lot around it. So this man has written one book that I know of called the Yoga Makaranda, and it's a wonderful book, but it's also very traditional. So it's more for like someone who's dedicating their life to practicing, not for someone who's trying to integrate it in daily life so much. And it talks a lot about holding postures. So he talks about, just for example, downward dog. He suggests building up to holding for 15 minutes, just so you have some idea of the different way that they used to practice, right? And Shivananda also focuses on holding. So the more traditional yogas focus on holding the postures because, in my experience anyway, I always say the healing is in the holding, right? So that's what healed my back. Is there's a lot of things that go on when you're holding the postures, feeling your breath, feeling the body, the sensations, and going a bit deeper, quieting your mind, and feeling what's going on. There's energies that move, and the body heals itself. That's my experience. But you can see that they also knew something about holding the postures because they do hold them. So Shivananda, um, they have, of course, it's evolved. So there's different ways of practicing Shivananda yoga now. But traditionally, there was a set sequence for Shivananda yoga where each posture is held for 5 minutes, and the sequence takes up an hour. So each posture is 5 minutes, and that might sound easy if it was on the ground. right? But it's not. And a lot of these postures, I remember my teacher in India used to say, if you can practice Sivananda Yoga, the full sequence for an hour, you can easily do any vigorous type of yoga because it's very challenging. It's like holding crow pose or an arm balance for 5 minutes, or standing on your head for 5 minutes, upside down. And so it takes a tremendous amount of endurance and strength to practice this type of yoga. But they both also emphasize, of course, all the breathing practices and meditation. And it's not solely focused on postures. Okay, so there's a lot more stuff here now, but these are the main types of yoga that, see, you realize how many there are, right? It seems like, so it doesn't, you don't think about it this much, but there's really so many different types. And these, you don't see much of these more traditional styles, but this is what all modern yoga comes from, and for the most part, with very few exceptions. So Iyengar was a student, BKS Iyengar was a student of Krishnamacharya, okay? And then he started Iyengar style yoga. So one thing to remember about yoga is Shivananda Yoga, Iyengar Yoga, right? These yogas are usually the way that these people practiced and found it beneficial within themselves. And then they started sharing the way they practiced. And I really believe each of us does that, right? So you explore all these things and you find your own way, you find what works for you. And then I have Anthony Yoga, and you have Mary Yoga or John Yoga or whatever your name is. And we each find our own unique path. So that's pretty much what these are. So Iyengar Yoga is focused a lot on alignment. He's the person that is really largely responsible for bringing props into yoga. And and so all of the props you have today, pretty much Iyengar brought into yoga. So the blocks, he used to use like big wooden blocks, but now we have the soft, nice foam blocks, and bolsters, blankets, everything. He even used to use horses, like those balancing horses that they use in gymnastics. He would even use those. So his Iyengar's whole point was alignment and using props to get the body into the correct alignment to get the benefit of the posture. So this is very therapeutic, I would say, and it depends always on the teacher that you're practicing with, of course. Some people use the props to go deeper into the postures, but this is also where the original chair yoga comes from, because he used chairs as well, but he used chairs to, for example, you would back bend over the chair. So it wasn't something like that we would do in chair yoga in a class, not making it more accessible with the chair, but using the chair to support you progressing and going deeper into the posture is what his focus was. So if you're interested in Iyengar, he has a book called Light on Yoga that's about yoga postures solely, and one called Light on Pranayama that's just about the breathing practices. These are excellent books if you ever want to go deeper into that. Next we have Ashtanga Yoga. So Ashtanga Yoga, what they say happened was that Krishnamacharya and the man who brought Ashtanga Yoga to the United States, Patabi Joyce, he was also a student of Krishnamacharya. And they say that they found these writings on banana leaves that had these postures listed in the sequence. They spent time figuring it out together, and that's where the set sequences from Ashtanga came from. That's my understanding of it anyway. And Ashtanga Yoga, so it means 8 limbs of yoga. If you watch the other video on the paths of yoga, you know what that means. And there's 8 limbs of the postures of the yoga, including the postures is one of the limbs. And Ashtanga Yoga is a set sequence. Nowadays, of course, everything evolves, so there's more accessible Ashtanga Yoga classes. But traditionally, Ashtanga Yoga takes roughly 90 minutes or so to do. It's a set sequence. There are multiple sequences, so you progress. In other words, you would do the primary series, which is the first sequence, and you would do that until you can progress to the next sequence. And it's very it's very done on your own. There's a lot of assists in class, so the teacher usually walks around and doesn't demonstrate anything in traditional way of practicing. And they walk around and they count out everything. So in Sanskrit, they'll count out how long you're holding each posture. You do like a lot of those high plank, low plank, upward facing dog, downward dog. So a lot of vinyasas, the same movement over and over again between postures. and it's very warming, very heating practice. None of these are heated, by the way. Traditionally, any of these classes are heated. That's a more modern thing. And Ashtanga Yoga traditionally doesn't have any props. There's no assistance. It's kind of like you go in the room, they start talking you through the practice, and you just look at everybody else because everyone in there knows what they're doing. It's usually like a very strong following. It's a lot of people really they stick with it their whole life. So the people in the room, you have like a bunch of people giving you an example of how to do the posture, and that's the way you learn. Like you go in and they call it out, and you look around and you see what other people are doing, and then you do it, and the teacher will come over and assist you physically to help you get into the posture. This is the most common way that I've seen it practiced, and you kind of just figure it out as you go along. Now they have some more tutorial classes, shorter classes like 60-minute Ashtanga and things, but the more traditional way is like Mysore style, they call it, where you would just go in and everybody knows the primary series already, and then you just practice. And you all go through the primary series at your own pace, and the teacher walks around and assists. This is focused with props, and it can be difficult and challenging. I wouldn't say this is very alignment based and with props, but it sounds like it may be very accessible when it could be challenging. It could be challenging because Iyengar teachers tend to be a little, I don't want to say obsessed with, but focused on alignment, right? Like Iyengar himself, very, very focused on alignment. And Ashtanga, they're helpful. It's a very helpful, the teacher's always helpful, but very much encouraging you to do it on your own and use your figure it out and do the best you can. And the modifications are all modifications of going a little bit less into the posture or adjusting that way rather than having any support, right? So both of these, I would say, are you can try them if you're a beginner, but I would suggest trying something a little more gentle first, like a gentle class, something like that. Unless you feel strong and stable, then go for it. One more thing about Ashtanga, I just wanted to share with you that if you do, I always want to give you a book. I'm a big book person. And if you ever want to study Ashtanga a little more, one of the best books that I think you can find on the subject is either David Swenson. That's the most accessible one, and I think I would suggest starting with that. David Swenson's book is called Ashtanga Yoga, and it's really good guide. It gives options for all the postures, and you can really get introduced that way. Iyengar, Light on Yoga is good, but he also has another book called The Way to Holistic Health, and that's a good book because it gives you more modifications. It goes through the postures more slowly. Light on Yoga only shows the very, very deep maximum position of the posture. Okay, so it doesn't give many options for modifications. Viniyoga was started by Desikachar, who is Krishnamacharya's son, and it's very therapeutic. I love Viniyoga, and I find it very therapeutic. It doesn't really go by this title anymore. I haven't really seen this word used a lot, Viniyoga, but he has a wonderful book called The Heart of Yoga. And man, that book is wonderful. And that gives you a sense of what I think this is, to be honest with you, in my opinion, this is the closest you can get to real Vinyasa yoga, like what Krishnamacharya taught, in that the vinyasas are very mindful, very slow, and it's not combining a bunch of postures. It's very focused. It'll be like cat and cow. When you do the cat and cow tilts on your hands and knees in class, that is very similar to what Viniyoga is like. And then, for example, if you're doing a forward fold, it would be inhale, come all the way up, arms overhead, exhale, fold forward. Inhale, arms overhead, exhale, fold forward. But very, very slow, very deep breathing, very mindful, and repetitive movements. And everything is very gentle. This is like a wonderful, 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 in my opinion, place to start if you can find a class from someone who studied with Desikachar or based in his way of teaching. It's very wonderful, very therapeutic. So this is just to give a short, quick summary. This is prop focused, alignment focused. This is very much on your own set sequence. You go in, do the practice yourself and with some guidance, but pretty much yourself. And Viniyoga is more therapeutic, more gentle, more mindful of your if you have anything going on like injuries and things like that. Iyengar, in my opinion, can be a little bit rough when if you watch videos of him, like with people with injuries and shoulder injuries. I mean, he knows what he's doing. Obviously, he's been doing it forever, but he can be a little rough with people. Next, we have Shivananda Yoga, and from Shivananda Yoga, we'll jump all the way over here now to the right. So this lineage now. So we covered all of this, right? And he has two more. Krishnamacharya has two more students, three more actually. Indra Devi is one of them. She was less about posture, so much more like talking. And then A.G. Mohan and Srivatsa Ramaswamy, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but that's his name. He wrote a wonderful book called Vinyasa Yoga. It's extremely challenging, though. It's not like an accessible form of yoga. A.G. Mohan is also very close to Viniyoga. It's very similar in my opinion. So he's another wonderful person who wrote a few actually really good books. A.G. Mohan, if you want to look him up, that's very close to Viniyoga. Something to remember between these two is that Krishnamacharya had a family, a wife, children, and as did all of his students. So Iyengar also had a family, wife, children, Patabi Joyce, and Desikachar. So this is they come from different place, right? This Shivananda was a Swami, so he lived in an ashram and was supported by donations and all this stuff, and doing just giving freely to everybody. So it's a different. Just keep in mind it's a different lineage, so it's a different feel, different vibe. So his student, this was Swami Shivananda. His one student was named Swami Satyananda, and he started a school of yoga called Bihar Yoga. It's in Bihar, is a city in India, and Bihar Yoga, with impersonally, is one of my favorite. So Bihar Yoga is just so beautiful and well rounded. It's one of the styles of yoga that really emphasizes yoga nidra, which is like that long hour. It's like an hour long shavasana, that final relaxation at the end of class, like an hour long, right? But much deeper. It's sort of like a guided meditation, if you want to call it that. And Bihar, in my opinion, is very holistic. It's whole. It's complete. It equally emphasizes mantra. It equally emphasizes postures, breathing practices, meditation, lifestyle, and all these different eating and diet and all these. It emphasizes everything very equally. So it's very holistic and beautiful. And the Bihar School of Yoga has tons of books. You just don't see them in America a lot because they're published in India. So you can find them online if you look them up. So Bihar School of Yoga. And one of the best ones, if you just want to start somewhere, if you do want to start with a book, it's called Asana, Pranayama, Mudras, and Bandhas. And if you just type in Bihar School of Yoga in Amazon, you'll find it. And integral yoga also, Shivananda was holistic himself. So integral yoga was by his other student, disciple, however you want to say, Satchidananda, Swami Satchidananda. And these are all, again, if you want to call them monks, or they lived in ashrams. So integral yoga was developed by Satchidananda, and it's very similar idea to Bihar Yoga. It's different, of course. It has its differences. Bihar has tantric aspects to it, like they use that terminology like tantra, but integral yoga was also brought to the United States. Swami Satchidananda came over here, and he has a lot of talks, but it's very holistic in the sense that it emphasizes like daily life, how to deal with your mind, relationships, but also it teaches very gentle asana, gentle breathing. And I remember Swami Shivananda used to say, and it carried down with all of his students, that you just do a little bit of asana. He would say a little bit of asana, a little bit of pranayama, a little bit of meditation, a little bit of japa. So a little bit of postures, a little bit of breathing practices, a little bit of meditation, a little bit of chanting. He would always say like serve, love, give. Simple things for daily life and goodness. Just beautiful person, beautiful teachings. All of these over here, very from the heart. Beautiful. So Swami Satchidananda has like an ashram that he started here in Virginia. It's looks like a giant lotus flower, and you can go there. You could look up integral yoga. I'm sure you can find classes around. Bihar, probably the book is the best place. There's not I don't haven't seen many places that teach Bihar yoga here in America, but I'm sure you could find them. And then Kundalini. So Kundalini yoga is very energy focused. It's very much about emotion, energy. It's all the same thing. Energy, emotion is emotion, but it's very focused on that. Shivananda wrote a book on Kundalini yoga and used to talk about it, but it's different from. There's another lineage of Kundalini yoga that is by Yogi Bhajan, and that's what a lot of people practice when you see Kundalini yoga. That's usually the one that they practice. And Kundalini is very, very different, like from the other styles of yoga, in the sense that you go, like if you took another style of yoga, for example, and then you go to a Kundalini class, and you don't know what to expect, you might feel like what is going on here, kind of. Just to be honest with you. So it's one of those classes that you kind of want to know what it is, what's going on there a little bit first before you look into it a little bit before you go, because it's going to be like a lot of there's like intense breathing practices and moving the body and like repetitive movements, and it's really designed to like release emotion and release like these stuck energies, and to raise the kundalini energy, right? So it's bringing the energy from the lower chakras up into the head, and it stimulates energy. So it's very focused on that, and it's just practiced very differently. If you're going to thinking about trying a class for that, I suggest trying it. You never know, you either like it or you don't. I feel like that's that's the kind of thing that kundalini yoga is. And you either go in there and you do it and you're like, what was that? Or you're like, I love this and I'm coming back. Now let's talk about yin yoga. So yin yoga is one of the more modern yoga types. So these are all very old, the ones that we've gone over already. Now we're going to talk about some modern yoga types, some new yoga types. Yin yoga is based on the Chinese meridian system. So it's based on stimulating those meridians through the postures, through specific postures. And the people who study yin study a lot of about the Chinese meridian energy systems. And the yin, here's the thing we talked about earlier, that Krishnamacharya talks about holding downward dog for 15 minutes. So it's not new. People usually think like yin is just holding the postures really long, and that's nothing new because he did this already, right? In his books, he's clearly says that, and even much longer than you hold yin postures. So it's not about holding the postures long, but yin is that we have yin and yang, right? So yang is with strength and effort, like Ashtanga is like a very yang sort of energy in that practice, right? But yin is is very yin. So there's not very much it's about completely relaxing into the postures. In other words, like Iyengar, if you say you're folding forward, they would keep the chest lifted and spine straight and folding forward with a long spine. But yin would just fold and round your spine. It's like yin is like letting go, and you completely soften and relax into the posture. And typically you hold the posture for about 5 minutes or so, but they can be shorter. Like if you're doing both sides, sometimes it's 2 to 3 minutes. If the class is newer, the teacher will adjust, things like that. And then we have restorative yoga. So there's some classes now called restore, and that is not restorative. So just don't confuse that if you're going to a restore class. A restore class is just a name that people have given to a class that's sort of in between a gentle and a restorative. And restorative is completely relaxing still. So there is nothing at all that you're doing. Like you use the props just like you use props in Iyengar. But in Iyengar, they use the props to support you in getting into the correct alignment for the posture. In Restore, they use the props to help your body completely soften and relax in a posture. So restorative is similar to yin in the way that that you hold postures very long, but besides that, they're not similar at all, because yin postures can be very challenging, actually, some of the positions. But restorative is always putting your body in a position where you can completely soften and relax. It's completely focused on total relaxation of your nervous system. And that's what restorative is. It's sort of like a final relaxation or a shavasana posture in every posture. And you hold the postures for 10 minutes each, about, in a traditional restorative class, completely supported by props. And you just stay in the posture for 10 minutes and breathe. So this is where you can kind of see that it's relative, right? What is considered challenging for people. Because if your body is having a lot of problems and trouble, this type of yoga might be very challenging for you, right? If you need to keep moving constantly and can't stay still in the postures, and find don't have the strength built up for holding the postures, this type of yoga will be very challenging. If you have trouble sitting still or staying still for a few minutes, this type of yoga will be extraordinarily challenging. So it depends. Now, there's a few other types that I didn't put here just because it gets endless after a while. So this is the main this is the main yogas that everything comes from, that is more modern now, in my understanding, that is popular, that we know about, right? There's plenty of other lineages, teachers and stuff, but they're not popular enough in the sense that you'd be able to find their books or classes. And then a couple other yoga styles that you might come across if you're going to classes. So we talked about Vinyasa, right? Vinyasa, it's used very generally now. So that's one difficult thing about Vinyasa, is you don't really know what you're getting, and you don't know what you're getting into. It depends a lot on the teacher, who they study with, how they practice. The class could be heated, it could be unheated. I mean, there's just so many variations, that like a Vinyasa all levels could be very accessible, and it can be completely inaccessible. So it really depends, and it's too general that you can't judge the class. You'd have to just try the class or talk to the teacher beforehand to see if it's accessible for you, or if it'll be beneficial. So hot yoga has become very popular now. So I put this here so you can see hot yoga. As you can guess, it's a newer thing, because southern India is like 110 degrees, so nobody's putting any heat on and trying to practice in the house. So this is an American thing, and it comes all hot yoga, in my understanding, comes from Bikram yoga. So Bikram Chowdhury, he brought this hot yoga over, because he was from southern India. So they didn't practice hot in India. It was brought over, and he tried to take the temperature, the environment of southern India, and put it into a room in the United States. And that's how hot yoga became about. And the sequence he brought over is a set sequence. It's called 26 and 2, is what people usually refer to it as. And it's like 26 postures and 2 breathing practices. And it's actually a wonderful sequence. Like I think it's a wonderful sequence, and I would practice it not in the heat, but some people do practice it in the heat, and his classes are like 100. It's something around 100 degrees, and like super high humidity, something like 80 or 70% humidity. It might even be higher than that. I don't know. I'm not a hot yoga practitioner, but it's very, very hot. So this might be challenging if you have any excess heat in your body. This would probably not be good for you health wise to do, right? So like if you have hot flashes or something like that, this would be torture, a hot class. So you really have to, again, listen to your body, go by what feels good for you, and choose based on what is good for you, not just because people say it helps, because that is very general, and it depends. It depends on the person and your individual circumstances. So listen to your body. And the other types of hot yoga that come, so you'll see Bikram yoga will be his brand of yoga, and then other types of hot yoga which come from, they're all based in Bikram. Like when you watch the sequences, they're very similar to the sequence, with little changes, like hot yoga. And that can vary too. So you might want to contact the studio and ask them, like, what's the temperature, what's the humidity of the class, because it's not going to be the same everywhere. Everywhere does it different. And now it's become very popular hot yoga that they even have like regular classes heated, and they won't call it hot yoga, but the classes will just be heated, like to 85 degrees or 90 degrees or something, just like all the room is warm all the time. So you also might want to inquire about that if you don't want the heat, or if you do want the heat. And then there's just a few other ones that you might hear about. Jiva Mukti Yoga and Anusara Yoga, and the list goes on and on. There's just so many different types now. The more modern styles, like that, everyone makes their own style of yoga, and so there's many, many, many. And the best way to do it is to inquire, but these are the general that you'll see. If you're going to a yoga studio, like we said before, you might see gentle, restorative, Vinyasa level 1, 2, 3, all levels. You might see restore, you might see hot yoga, and you usually Iyengar is like specialized. So you'll find an Iyengar teacher at an Iyengar studio, and that will be it. Yin you might find mixed in like at regular studios. Ashtanga again is usually at like an Ashtanga studio. So it'll be like a studio that they teach Ashtanga yoga. It tends to be like specific, a very specific thing. But you can also find it at other places. Viniyoga, I think, is kind of difficult to find. You'll look for like a more therapeutic yoga teacher, someone who studied with injuries and healed with injuries, or works with healing, helping people heal themselves. Kundalini again is also usually a Kundalini studio. It's sometimes it's mixed in other studios, but usually it's very specific. The people like that practice it is like a community, so it's usually very specific to a studio. And Bihar, I don't know how many people you'll be able to find who teach that here in the United States. Like in India, it's very popular. But you look it up, you might be able to find people. Integral yoga, for sure, you can find people with that training here, and Sivananda yoga as well. That they're very popular, Shivananda trainings. Hot, you can find almost everywhere now. It's very popular, and Vinyasa you can find everywhere. So if you have any questions, if there's any styles that you come into and you're wondering if it's good for you, feel free to comment, and I can let you know if I know anything about it. And if you wanted to know about any of those books that I mentioned that you're not sure about or couldn't find, let me know, and I'll give you the titles and the links. And besides that, so let me know if this was helpful or not, or if you have any questions. I just wanted to give you guys kind of an overview. And I kind of love this stuff, the lineage stuff. I love all this very much, and so I might go a little deep into it, but I just wanted to give you like an overview. I can't help myself from going in and giving you more information, but the overview of the different types of yoga and what to expect if you're kind of just new to yoga and looking around and trying to find what's right for you, what you want to try out next. So that's it for today, and thanks for joining me, and have a lovely day.